All right, it is 11:30. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the state. Thank you for joining us today for our first summer series, Lunch and Learn. We have been doing Lunch and Learns quarterly, but during the summer months, we are going to be doing an additional Lunch and Learn at least through August. More information will be coming out about this in TriStarts and staff updates, so look for that. But I am back from maternity leave and happy to see you all here. We have Stephanie Burkhart with Heightened Potential Therapy. She's going to share some information with us today about fine and visual motor development. But before she gets started, just a couple of housekeeping items for everyone. All previously recorded Lunch and Learns can be found on the TEIS Community Resource website, and I will put that link in the chat here in just a moment. Also, please use the chat just for questions for Stephanie or for myself. If we can avoid extra chatter in the chat, that's very helpful. If you have a specific question for me during the presentation, maybe WebEx related, anything else, you're always welcome to shoot me over an email, even if it's during the presentation today. And my email is emily.greer@tn.gov. If you are interested in using closed captioning for today's presentation, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see the CC icon, and you can hover over that. It says show closed captions. So if you're interested in using that, you can have closed captions using that icon below. Also, we would like to hold questions until the end of the presentation. However, if you think of a question, you want to go ahead and get it out of your brain, you're welcome to put that into the chat, but we will address all questions at the end of the presentation. Also, at the end of the presentation, I will place the FormStack link for you to be able to share feedback and get your certificate of attendance today. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Stephanie. We appreciate you being here with us today, and we're excited to learn about some OT stuff.
Well, thank you. Yeah, as Emily said, I'm Stephanie Burkhart. I'm with Heightened Potential Therapy Services. I've been in OT for a little, well, I guess close to 10 years now, and I've done pediatrics for the last 6 years. So currently I offer services mainly in Knox County, and I'm really excited that I get to share a little bit about fine and visual motor development with all of you. So just a brief overview, we'll go over what fine and visual motor skills are, things we have to consider when we think about both of their developments, and then we'll go through the developmental milestones for each age group and kind of how everything builds on top of each other in terms of the skills you acquire from birth all the way until 3. So in general, fine and visual motor skills tend to be kind of linked and placed together when we talk about a child's deficits or abilities related to play and self-care. So actual fine motor skills are just the coordination of small muscles in the hand, fingers, and wrist when they perform a precise or controlled movement. So when we think about fine motor skills, we strictly think about manipulation, muscle strength, sensation in the hand, dexterity, awareness, and motor planning of an actual action. When we think about visual motor skills, we're talking about the ability to interpret visual information and then respond with a fine motor movement or a coordinated body movement. So when we think about visual motor skills, we're talking about hand-eye coordination, visual perception, ocular motor control, and visual spatial perceptual skills. So like I said, typically you're going to hear these kind of combined because when we look at a child's ability to play with toys or take care of themselves, they have to have both sorts of skills working together to carry out actions. Just another thing to kind of think about while we go through all of these different milestones that we look for our little ones to kind of move through is that infant acuity and ocular motor control doesn't reach what we would consider 20/20 vision until the age of 2. So just something, little tidbit to keep in mind as we start to go through some of these skills. And then also just another little tidbit about vision is thinking that depth perception doesn't typically develop until around the age of 5 to 8 months. So I like to throw that in here. So as you're thinking about a fine motor skill, a visual motor skill, we also have to just keep vision in the back of our mind and knowing what a child can and cannot actually see and perceive. Other things we like to consider when we look at fine and visual motor development that aren't typically thought of when we just think of a child's ability to grasp a toy or to play. We look at prenatal factors and complex pregnancies. So things like intrauterine growth restrictions, exposure to drugs and alcohol, in utero, things like that are going to impact a child's development, generally, obviously neurologically, but also if there's less space in the uterus, if there's also anything that is kind of coating the sensory system, so they're not getting as much feedback in utero, that is going to impact their ability to control their muscles and understand what their body is doing. We obviously look at medical history and current diagnoses, such as the autism spectrum, cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, things like that, that we know has effects on the ability for the brain to not only see and coordinate movements based off that, but actual motor movement with muscle control. We also like to consider cultural factors. So in different cultures, since we serve such a vast population, we have to consider how families want their children to play, the toys they allow their children to play with, where they're allowed to play, if they're only allowed to play on the floor, if they're not allowed to play on the floor at all, if they're only allowed to play sitting in a lap versus sitting on their own. Those are all things we have to consider when we start to look at how skills are developing. And then obviously we need to consider environmental factors. So not just the physical environment of the home, is it safe that they can sit on the floor, that they have somewhere to sit and play, but also things like socioeconomic status. Is the family able to obtain toys that allow a child to move through the developmental sequence of improving and progressing through fine motor and visual motor skills? So we're going to jump right in. So I've kind of broken these up in just 2 to 3 month spans to begin with, and then they become larger chunks as they get older. But the first group we're going to look at is just that birth to 3 months. So everything in this stage is based on involuntary reflexive movement. So we're going to see lots of wriggling and writhing with the arm movement. So if any of you have had kids and you can feel them kicking, moving, pushing around, it's that same movement. Except now a child's learning to move those arms without the restriction of the uterus and without all the input from amniotic fluid. So they're feeling their body in free space for the first time. We're also going to then start to see reflexive grasp and the movement of the hands to the mouth. So again, we see that in utero. And so a child kind of carries that over now that they're out in free space. And they're learning to put their thumb in their mouth, their fingers in their mouth, or they'll have, their blankie and they're pulling it to their mouth. It's all reflexive, and eventually it progresses into a purposeful movement. We also have we also start to see them briefly holding things in their hands. So we're starting to see the use of that palmar reflex. And we'll see kind of a scratching and grasping look. So you'll kind of see them just move their fingers out, grasp and pull something. It's not always necessarily purposeful, but they might just look like they're scratching at something. We also start to see them turn their head and look at their outstretched limbs, which is also a primitive reflex that babies are born with. And we'll see them start to begin batting at objects and toys. It's kind of funny to watch them do that because they're most of the time not anywhere close, or they're too close to an object. So they don't have that depth perception yet. And they're just figuring out how to move their limbs towards something that they're getting as a visual input. When we then start to look at the milestones from ages 4 to 6 months, we start to look at the progress from involuntary movement to more purposeful movement using really big muscle groups. So you're going to start to see both arms going forward and progressing to purposely actually reach with that visual guidance and feedback. So again, because we are starting to see some of that depth perception progressing and developing, then we see them actually being able to reach and grasp toys with both arms. We also see that just kind of absent-minded raking and grasping is now starting for them to actually purposely reach towards something, use those fingers to grasp and bring it to their bodies and bring it to their palm. At this stage too, we see them start to engage their fingers at midline, and they start to transfer objects from one hand to the other. So this is really big because as babies are born with primitive reflexes, they begin to integrate when we have purposeful play and movement. So the ATNR, or the asymmetric tonic labyrinth reflex, begins to integrate at this age. And so babies are starting to learn, I have a right side of my body, I have a left side of my body, and now they can work together. My toys can move from one side to the other, and my hands can do something together and separate to play. This is also when we see the palmar grasp reflex start to integrate. So we're going to see them start to actually grab toys purposefully and even start to slowly let go, not always fully, but slowly start to let go. And we may even see them start to shake rattles. Usually it's a big arm movement. You're going to see them do big whole arm shaking. And then as they progress through, and we'll talk about that in the next slide, you'll see more small movements with the shaking. This is also when we see them the very, very beginnings of them starting to participate in self-feeding. So we're using that whole arm and that raking grasp to maybe shove our hands into some purees. Or if we're doing more of the baby-led weaning style, maybe big, gross grasp of a big piece of chicken or something, and we're starting to bring it to our mouth as we're starting to understand that self-feeding portion. As we jump into the 7 to 9 month mark, our development goes really, really into taking that purposeful engagement and refining some of that movement. So we start to see kids poking with their index finger. So their other fingers might not be drawn to the palm, but they're getting that index finger out and they're using it. They're using their arm to reach in all directions. So not just forward, but out to the side, sometimes behind them, over top of them. We're also starting to see that raking grasp. So again, they're going from raking something really big to their palm to now they're maybe looking at puffs or small little yogurt bites, raking them to their palm and figuring out how to get them in their mouth. And we also, again, this is where we start to see that purposeful grasp and release. So we are seeing them grasp the rattle, really purposefully shake it. And now we're understanding, oh, we're going to let go of it because I'm done playing with it because that palmar reflex has started to integrate. And like I said, we're starting to self-feed with smaller foods because we have that raking grasp. We're then learning how to bring it to our mouth, purpose release, and kind of shove as many as they can, usually right into their mouth. So the 10 to 12 month mark, this is for me like when I start to really think about refinement, refinement, refinement. So all these skills that they've built on are now just becoming more and more precise. So we're moving from using those big, large muscle groups like the shoulder, the elbow to play or carry out an action. And now we're starting to use those smaller muscle groups like our forearm, wrist, and fingers. So this is when we start to see them use what we call a crude pincer grasp. So they look so silly when they do it, but it's usually them trying to grab small little items, and it's either my thumb against the side of the finger, or my thumb against 2 or 3 different fingers trying to grasp something small, like a puff to put in our mouth. And as the time goes from about 9, 10 months to 12 months plus, we're going to see them do a pincer grasp like you and I would do. So we approach an object from the top. We use the tip of our index and the tip of our thumb to grasp it, and it stays right there. We know how much pressure to apply to keep it in that spot. It's not slipping out of our fingers. It's not using the sides of our finger. It's using the tips. We also see them start to do the thing that every parent loves, which is remove their socks and shoes. The STNR, or the symmetric tonic labyrinth, or the symmetric dominant labyrinth reflex is starting to integrate. So they're understanding the difference between the top and bottoms of their body, and they're realizing their hands can be used and so useful to take off socks and shoes. So we're also then starting to use our fingers to grasp the edge of the socks, and we're building strength, pulling them off with some resistance from a soccer shoe. We also see kids starting to combine our hands at midline to carry out an action. So we're banging little balls together, blocks together to make music and sounds. We're also starting to clap. So they're starting to understand that hands can be used together to carry out an action or to play. We also start to see them use very, very simple cause and effect toys. So you may see them start to push down on a spinning toy. You may see them start to take a ball and drop it into, a ball drop, or like one of the ball poppers. So they're starting to learn, if I do this action, this thing happens, and they can often imitate and repeat it multiple times. So this is where our big jump kind of happens. The 12 to 24 months, again, is just the time of refinement. So we're taking all of those skills from the 10 to 12 months and we're refining them to more and more precise movements. So we're now looking at, instead of just using our index finger with all of our other fingers kind of up when we're interacting with something, we now isolate and point with the index finger. So we've taught our nerve, the 2 nerves that really innervate our hand, like, hey, we can kind of close these other fingers and put my thumb over it, and I can just use my index finger to interact with or select things. This is also when we begin to see kids self-feed with utensils. So now our kids have moved from needing that tactile, proprioceptive sensory style feedback from our hands, in addition to our visual input, to know that we got something in our mouth, to now we can use a tool which gives no sensory feedback, that we can actually watch how we scoop and coordinate that movement and bring it to our mouth. This is also when we see, this is like, at least for me, my favorite time as a therapist, and I think parents would agree. Kids learn to place things in containers, which we call cleaning up. So this is the time that we get to teach our kids, it's cleanup time, let's put our toys in the bin, because they're able to coordinate and visually see, I take this item, I can bring it over into this space, which is like my cleanup bin or my toy bin, and I can let go. And we've learned that that is a cleanup action. Building off of that, once we learn just the general grasp and release and putting something into, a cleanup bin or a container, then kids start to visually understand and match pictures. So we see them starting to complete simple puzzles. So I'm sure all of you have seen like the little 3-piece puzzles that have like the dog and the cat and the bird. So kids are now starting to realize, oh, I can take this, match my picture, and turn and put it in as a more refined and complex motion of just placing some, toy in a bin. At this point, we also see them starting to stack cubes to create small towers. So not only are we working up from being able to just match and put things together, we know that these blocks go together. We have the fine motor precision to grasp the block and the precision to put it on top. And now our brain is also starting to understand the visual component of this is what on top means. This is how I line it up so it doesn't fall over. And then we also see kids' grasp beginning to change. So most of our kids from, 1 progressing into 2 are going to start with that typical palmar or fisted grasp on a crayon or a marker or a piece of chalk or something like that. And they're going to progress to what we call digital pronate, where the wrist is flipped over, our thumb and finger are out, and it almost looks like we're kind of pointing as we color. And so that's a very, very typical progression to kind of pronate the wrist and forearm and start to color in that manner. And when we are coloring, we see them move from just doing like little dots or taps or big scribbles to imitating lines like vertical lines, horizontal lines, and circles. So again, not only are we doing the fine motor piece of grasping something, but we have that visual motor component of imitating lines and circles that are given to us by an adult or another peer. The next big jump is that 24 to 36 months. So in this year, again, refinement, refinement, refinement. So before, what was very small blocks, because that's all we could coordinate in terms of getting high up and maybe doing 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks, block towers. Now we're doing taller and taller towers because our arms can reach higher, our shoulders are stronger and can reach up higher. And we have that precision to place blocks directly on top of each other without it falling. And we're even starting to imitate 3 and 4 block structures. So if I were to make like a little 4-block train, kids can watch and then coordinate their 3 or 4 blocks to make it look just the same. They're also starting to understand how to coordinate their fingers and their wrists to carry out complex movements. So I always kind of correlate these to a busy box. So those boxes that you can push, slide, twist, and like a little animal or something pops up. So now we're understanding how to coordinate our fingers and our wrists to carry out an action. So it's kind of building on top of that simple cause effect where I just push down and it spins something to, oh, now I have to push, push, push against resistance until this pops up. Now I have to problem solve how to wind something, how to slide it. So it's just building on top of that initial cause effect skill. This is also when we start to see kids really, really use one hand as a stabilizer and one hand as an action hand. So we see that when they start to screw and unscrew jar lids, or when they're stringing beads, where one hand starts by feeding the string through the block, and then they kind of switch. That other hand starts to hold it while the other hand pulls the string through. So we're also working on a lot of that bilateral coordination, understanding which hand is my helper hand, which hand is my stabilizing hand, which hand's my action hand, and can they switch when I need them to. This is also when our crayon or utensil grasp starts to progress from that digital pronate to what you and I would most likely use, which is a tripod or quadruped grasp. So those 3 to 4 fingers with the pencil laying in the open web space on your hand. At this age, they are still probably using their wrist and forearm to do a majority of the movement. But as they get older and as their hand gets stronger, the motion gets more coordinated, then they'll be just like you and I, where they're using their fingers to move the crayon, marker, pencil, whatever, and not their wrist or whole hand. And this is the one that gets parents all the time, but this is also the age where we start to learn how to use scissors. So again, it's that bilateral coordination skill of one hand holding the paper, and then another hand learning that open close motion with scissors. And we have the visual feedback of how do I open, get the paper inside the scissors, snip it, and then to even learn how do I go from snipping to cutting all the way across paper? How do I perceive a line on a paper or a curve on a paper that I have to stay on while I'm cutting? So those are the very basic milestones all the way to age 3. And just kind of shows how we go from those big simple involuntary movements to refinement over those first 3 years of using smaller and smaller muscle groups. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen really quick. There we
go. Thank you, Stephanie. Yes, perfect. You stop sharing screen, so you're good to go. Do we have any questions for Stephanie? You are welcome. We don't have anything in the chat currently. Let me double check just to make sure. Nope, no questions in the chat right now. If anyone does have a question, feel free to pop that in the chat. Okay, someone has raised their hand. Well, Kelly, it looked like you raised your hand and then you lowered your hand. Okay, perfect. Give me just a second and I will find you and unmute you and let you ask your question. Just a second. All right, Kelly, I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, I'm a service coordinator on the statewide team, and I hopped on a little bit late, but so you might have mentioned this already, but when do you recommend to start baby-led weaning? Closer to 6 months? And do you recommend any certain foods to start with?
So I don't do feeding. I will do like
Okay.
helpful oral motor or oral sensory feeding. I'm not an oral
Mhm.
motor or feeding therapist. That's a really, really good question for a feeding therapist.
Okay.
Typically like a speech therapist would do. All the speech therapists I have worked with typically do that.
Mhm.
So I would definitely refer out to talking to one of them or a pediatrician. They can give much better recommendations than I can in terms of starting that. I brought up baby-led weaning in this presentation because so many
Mhm.
families I've worked with have done it.
Mhm.
And that's typically where I see like some of those big raking grafts to, like I said, get a big piece of chicken or whatever they happen to
Okay.
present to the child.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Great question. Thank you. Anybody else have a question? Let's see. I'm putting the Formstack link in the chat right now, so you all can go ahead and complete that. And then, of course, we'll hang out a couple more minutes. Okay, we do have a question in the chat. It says, would chewing on wood be something that could be worked on in OT? It sounds like maybe possibly some sensory syncing stuff.
Yeah, I would definitely say if you notice a child chewing on something that tends to be unsafe or a non-edible food or a non-delineated item that is okay to chew on, like a chewer or oral motor tool, to definitely reach out to an OT to work on some sensory things and to find more appropriate means of getting oral input.
Right. Marissa, I have unmuted you. I think you had your hand up for a question.
Hey, yes, I am a service coordinator also in the Greater Nashville District, and I had a question about like hand dominance because I've heard mixed things about what age you should be like starting to have a dominant hand, and I've heard some people say it's like 4 or 5, it shouldn't be before then, but kind of based on the milestones that we reviewed, it seems like one hand is starting to be the helper hand or the stabilizer hand even as early as like 2 or 3, and the other hand is the action hand. And so it seems like it's coming before 4 or 5. And so I guess I would love some more clarity on that of like, what do you feel like the best approach is? And is that typical that we should be saying, yes, it's natural for one hand to go ahead and start doing those actions more than the other before age 4 or 5?
It's definitely normal to start seeing a dominance before 4 or 5. We typically say between ages of 4 and 6 is when a hand dominance is completely established. It's definitely emerging beforehand. For me personally, and I know there's a lot of other therapists that I've worked with that are similar in this, if I have a child who we're working on, drawing, coloring, something like that, presenting whatever tool you're giving them to draw with at midline, so right in the middle of their body, so that they can make a decision. A lot of us, and I'm guilty of this all the time, I will naturally hand them something in their right hand because I'm right-handed. So really making a conscious effort to place it in the middle of the body, allow them to make that choice. And then my go-to is whatever hand they start off with in an activity, we use that for the entire activity. Now, if we do know that there's if CP is happening, we have some sort of genetic or muscle issue where our hand fatigues faster, we may see that they tend to switch hands more often. Or if we have really poor body awareness and we don't cross midline, we'll see that a child will draw on the left side of their paper with left hand, right side of the paper with right hand. So those are things that we need to address that are going to be deficits later on, because if you can picture us as adults trying to write something, we're only writing on the left side of our paper with lefty and then we have to switch to righty. It's not efficient. So definitely allowing them to make the choice for me in an activity is important. Pushing them to follow through that entire activity with whatever hand they chose. And then with your OT, kind of talking like, hey, do they cross midline? Is this a midline crossing issue or is this a hand dominance issue? Because they might be right hand dominant, but their brain does not know that righty can pass into the left side of their body. So really digging deep on where is the issue? Is it a grasping issue? Is it a hand dominance issue? Is it a body awareness issue? So I think it's totally fine for them to start showing an emergence of a hand dominance before 4, but we really use that 4 to 6 age range to establish it and make them kind of carry through so that they are established by 6 when the expectations in school are that they're writing full sentences.
Thank you. Great question, Marissa. Tina, I see your question here. Will there be a PowerPoint for this presentation? Yes, that will be, no, I apologize. There will not be a PowerPoint for the presentation. However, if Stephanie, could she reach out to you if she was interested in receiving the PowerPoint? Perfect.
Absolutely.
Stephanie, if you want, are you able to see the chat now?
Yes, I can pop my email in there.
Perfect.
If anybody wants a copy of this. There you go.
Yep, I can see she's got her email address there now. We will not be providing the PowerPoint. However, the recorded presentation today will be going up on the TEIS Community Resource website. Give us a couple of days and for communications to get that on the website, but that will be available. And then if you're interested in the PowerPoint, please feel free to reach out to Stephanie. I have placed the link for the form stack there. It is in the chat. Yeah, great questions. Does anyone else have any other questions? We'll hang out. We've finished up a little bit early, so we'll probably give you some time back, but we will definitely hang out a little bit longer. We have a question here. What signs should caregivers or parents, daycare educators, etc., look for that might indicate a child needs an OT evaluation?
That's a great question, and I could probably spend an hour answering it. But I like to break it into the big things. So you have your sensory stuff, your motor stuff, your self-care stuff. So if a parent or a daycare worker notices that we maybe are headbanging outside a normal age range, we're really, really seeking, we crash, we climb, we jump, anything that's causing dysfunction and a safety concern, definitely refer to OT. On the fine motor and play side of things, if you notice that maybe we're supposed to be like coloring as a part of our class, but we are moving away from the activity, or we have big behaviors when it comes to trying to play with certain toys, things that require maybe some flexibility or some precision. So if they're not able to play with a toy beyond just like one way, or if we don't play with blocks because we can't manipulate them, we only know how to, mouth them or bang them, definitely a time to refer to OT. And then on the self-care side of things, if you notice that we're not feeding ourselves and we're over the age of 1, if we're not sticking our arms and legs out when mom and dad are trying to dress us, if we're not tolerating teeth brushing or bathing, those are also really good times to refer out to OT. I also have like little handouts for all of those on things like age ranges, and there's checklists all over. I would definitely recommend giving those to any daycares that you frequent, so that teachers know what to look out for.
Great, thank you. Very good information. Great question, Christine. Any other questions that we can think of? She said, can you share the handouts? Elena, if you want to email her, I bet that she could get those to you if you reached out via email, and her email address is in the chat there. No problem. While we are waiting to see if there's any more questions, just a reminder for our next Lunch and Learn. So this is starting our summer series, and we will have Stephanie back with us in June for a part 2 to follow up with some additional information from what she's presented today. But we are also continuing on with our typical quarterly lunch and learns. And our next quarterly lunch and learn will be on the 27th of this month, so just in a couple of days. And we have TEIS's very own Jamie Hampton is going to present Understanding Federal Indicators, what they mean for our work with children and families. And that's going to be May 27th, 11:30 to 12:30 Central Time. There should be information about that in TriStarts, and then additional information will be coming out about the follow-up June Lunch and Learn with Stephanie. So be looking for that information in TriStarts and staff update. And yeah, if anybody else has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I can unmute you, and feel free to put it in the chat as well. I am not seeing anything else come through. Someone said, great information and presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joanne. It was very informative. Yeah, I will hang out a couple more minutes. Stephanie, if you want to hang for just another minute or two and see if we get any more questions. Thank you all for attending today. Yeah, lots of thank yous coming in. And then we look forward to seeing you all in just a couple of days for our next Lunch and Learn about federal indicators. And then, of course, if you all have any follow-up questions that maybe you think of later, feel free to reach out to Stephanie, and she can provide some additional information for you all. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording because we're just getting lots of thank yous.